A report that suggests Australia should have more refugees. Not because it's the right thing to do for the world, but because it's the right thing to do for our economy. OK, have a look here. The findings of a Deloitte Access Economics report has challenged both major parties' reluctance to increase immigration rates, despite calls for the business community to face through sluggish economic growth. Now, forget immigration. We all know that that's the Ponzi scheme to keep everything going, as well as pay for welfare down the track. But Deloitte has said that moving the refugee cap from 18 to 44,000 refugees, this is on top of the 200,000 normal people that we would take each and every year, would grow the economy by $37 billion over the next 50 years. Well, of course, Pauline Hanson, this makes one very big assumption, that you're able to transition from refugee to employee a whole lot faster than taking out on the welfare system, because sadly the evidence is there that there's plenty of people that have come here over the past 10 years who have not moved to employment and therefore don't grow the economy at all.
That is correct, and you are exactly right. Last year we brought in nearly 22,000 refugees. I know the number is 18,750. We brought in extra. And the Labor Party want 27,000 with an extra another 5,000 on top of that, if anyone wants to fund them. The cost to the economy, and the cost of the economy is our way of life in Australia, meaning that people have to queue longer for to see doctors, specialists, hospitals, roads, infrastructure. The increased number of migrants we have coming to Australia, it is having an impact on our society, and that's what people are fed up with it. You quoted 200,000 or 190,000 the government said bringing in. Under the budget papers handed down this year, they've quoted 271,000, plus also we've got over 500,000 students in Australia. Then you have the business visas and you have everyone else in Australia. So, you know, they bring in the migrants to actually boost the GDP, and we're relying on that. We should be looking at, if we want to boost our productivity and the GDP, you do it in productivity with more industries, manufacturing, doing jobs. And this is where Australians are fed up with the refugees they're bringing in, that they are... You've got 60 million displaced people throughout the world. People are claiming refugee status because I'm inferior in my country. They may murder me because I'm a homosexual, or I'm against the political scene in that country. So they are shopping around for a place where they can go live a good life. They're given a welfare payment. They don't have to work. And I think it stinks when Australians out there that we need to clean up our own backyard first before we actually bring in more refugees into this country.
Yeah, Senator Patrick, let's get to what Deloitte's saying, though, saying that a refugee intake would have a direct positive effect on the economy. Now, if it can be demonstrated that anyone you bring into the country automatically starts a business or slowly but surely becomes employed, that's what happens here. Stimulating through welfare payments, etc., that's not the point of this. Where's this coming from?
Yeah, I think if you read the report, it talks about the cost at the very start being much, much lower than the benefit that flows a bit later on down track, and that we shouldn't lose sight of that. Look, I come from South Australia, visit regional South Australia all of the time, where there are communities that simply cannot find workers, where the populations are collapsing. It's creating all manner of problem. I get that people in the cities, in the crowded cities of Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne don't want additional people, that it becomes problematic for them. But we desperately need people in remote communities, regional communities, and indeed Adelaide. We've got a declining population compared to much of the rest of Australia.
But of course the issue, Stephen, is we can't create a system, or as best as I understand, you can't create a legal framework that says, sure, we'll accept your refugee status, but you have to agree you're going to move to regional South Australia and stay in regional South Australia for X number of years. Can that happen?
Look, certainly with the refugee component, there are complications. I'm not sure you can be that restrictive, but equally there aren't any services. Refugees have a higher need for services in the early years. They need support. Whereas you might be able to, and I know the government's been looking at this for a while, you might be able to find a visa system, a migration system that allows you to dictate where to go to. But certainly with the refugee component, I think that will be a tougher thing to do. And Rex makes a very good point. This is often a debate dominated by voices in Sydney Brisbane and Melbourne, where the population growth has been enormous and the strains on the existing infrastructure hasn't kept up with that population growth. But in many, many areas of regional and rural Australia, there is a desperate need for more people to go there to fill those jobs that Rex was talking about.
So, Rex, how do you create a scenario where if you've got 200,000 people coming in through normal migration, they'll end up Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane, how do we create a system that says you're only allowed in if you agree to live in a certain place for X number of years? And who's going to enforce that?
Well, Stephen is right in that it is much easier for people coming through normal immigration pathways because you might sign up to a visa that has conditions and both parties agree to the condition and therefore in that sense it's not problematic. Of course enforcement would be important, but most people once they're established they're not going to simply pick up and move. If they're supported, if they're coached, if they're provided assistance with jobs, if they're working on a farm or in a mine with a good job, they'll tend to stay there and honour their agreement.
Pauline, does any of that win you over?
No, not at all. Because if you think that you're going to stipulate where people come who are migrants applying to come here to this country and you're going to say you're going to have to go and live in the country, people will go where they feel comfortable. So they have existing family members here, they want to be close to them, they want to go where they have an opportunity to get a job. We know that in rural and regional areas it is hard to get employment there. If we can't get Australians now to move to these rural and regional areas because there's no work and because we don't have the services for them, how on earth are you going to police or get migrants to say they're going to go there? Yes, maybe to get into the country. How are you going to police it? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to say, well, if you don't stay there, we're going to deport you? And I'd like to see that transpire through the court system. So no, I don't believe in increasing the refugee numbers where the facts show that they don't get jobs. Most of them don't get jobs in the first 5 years they're here. And I'm sick of hearing people saying, how come a refugee can get housing before me? How come they have health care in the hospital system? If you're a refugee, you have the health care provided for you. You have everything laid out for you. And that's why Australians are so fed up with the refugees coming here and everything given to them. And Australians have to wait on this long list and they paid their taxes and given everything to this country. And that's why Australians are fed up with helping out refugees.